The Dying Garden. The Galactic Council Chamber looked like a funeral hall. Ambassador Krell of the Zenthri Empire stood at the central podium, his scales flickering with colors that meant sadness in his language. Around him, representatives from 47 species watched their holographic displays with growing horror. The decay spreads faster than our model predicted, Krell announced, his voice translator making his words sound flat and emotionless. Sector 7's agricultural stations have completely collapsed. 3 billion beings faced starvation within 2 cycles. I sat in the human delegation corner, watching the alien leaders panic. My name is Maya Chun, and I was the only human in a room full of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Funny how that worked out. The Zenthri had faster-than-light travel for 10,000 years. The crystalline collective could manipulate matter at the atomic level. The void dwellers existed partially in another dimension, but none of them could figure out why their food was dying. Perhaps we should increase synthetic nutrient production, suggested Ambassador Threen, a collective member whose body sparkled like a diamond under the chamber lights. Our people can survive on manufactured substances. For how long? Snapped Commander Vex, a void dweller whose form kept shifting between solid and transparent. The decay affects synthetic production facilities too. Everything organic breaks down faster than it should. Plants, animals, fungi, even bacterial cultures, all die before their time. I raised my hand. The gesture seemed childish among beings who communicated through color changes, pheromones, and quantum entanglement, but it worked. The room fell silent. Yes, Ambassador Chin? Krell's scales shifted to polite attention purple. Has anyone considered that maybe you are overthinking this? I asked. The silence turned cold. A Zenthri council in the back made a color pattern that my translator helpfully identified as offended condescension. Explain yourself, human, Krell said carefully. I stood up, pulling out my data tablet. You have been treating this like a technological problem. You sent scientific teams, ran billions of simulations, tried genetic modifications, artificial evolution, even temporal stasis fields. Nothing worked because you were looking in the wrong direction. And you believe you have identified what thousands of our greatest minds missed? Threen's crystalline body flashed with skepticism. Maybe, I said, because I grew up on a farm. Hashtag the forgotten art. The confused silence that followed was almost funny. These beings had conquered diseases, created artificial stars, and built cities that floated between dimensions. The concept of a farm seemed as primitive to them as a stone axe. My grandmother taught me to grow tomatoes when I was 6 years old. I continued, walking toward the central display. She taught me something that I think you have forgotten. Growing things is not just science. It is art, patience, and love. Love. Vex's form solidified slightly, showing genuine confusion. You propose an emotional solution to a biological crisis? Not exactly. I activated my tablet, projecting my own data onto the main screen. 3 months ago, I started investigating the decay pattern. I noticed something strange. Agricultural stations operated by younger species, those who only recently achieved space travel, were failing faster than those operated by older civilizations. But older civilizations were still failing. The only exception was human-operated stations. Impossible, said a Dralaxian representative, her tentacles curling with disbelief. Humans are one of the youngest spacefaring species. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Exactly, I said, smiling. We are primitive. We still remember things you forgot millions of years ago. I changed the display to show footage from a human agricultural station. This is Station Harvest 7. It grows food for 20 million beings across 4 systems. The manager is a human named James Rodriguez. Watch what he does. The footage showed James walking through rows of gene-mod wheat, but he was not checking monitors or adjusting atmosphere controls. He was touching the plants, running his hands along the stalks, inspecting individual grain heads, even smelling the soil. What is he doing? Krell asked. He is gardening. I said. He checks each section personally, 3 times per day. He adjusts conditions based not on computer models, but on how the plants look, feel, and smell. He keeps different varieties in adjacent sections to promote natural genetic exchange. He rotates crops manually instead of using the optimal efficiency pattern. And most importantly, he cares about the plants as living things, not production units. Inefficient, Threen stated. Our systems manage 300 times more plants per operator. And your plants are dying, I pointed out. Ours are not. Every human-operated station is functioning at 97% capacity or higher. Want to know why? I did not wait for an answer. You automated everything. You optimized every variable. You removed the unpredictability, the variation, the messy organic chaos that life needs to thrive. Your plants are dying because they exist in perfect conditions designed by computers that do not understand that perfection is death. Hashtag the test. This is absurd, declared a Zenthri counselor. You claim your primitive agricultural methods are superior to our optimized systems? I claim, I said carefully, that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways, not because they are primitive, but because they remember something important. Life is not a machine. Krell's scales rippled through several colors, processing this information. Finally, they settled on thoughtful orange. What do you propose? Let me prove it, I said. Give me one failing station. Just one. Let me implement human agricultural practices for one growing cycle. If it works, you listen to what I have to say. If it fails, you ignore me forever. The council erupted in debate. Voices, color patterns, pheromone bursts, and quantum signals filled the chamber. Some called me arrogant. Others called my proposal interesting. A few suggested I was insane. Krell raised his primary manipulator, and silence returned. Very well, Ambassador Chen. We will grant your request. You may take over Station Nexus 12 in Sector 4. It currently operates at 23% capacity and falling. You will have one standard cycle to show results. One condition. I added, I choose my own team. Humans only. Why? Vex asked. Because I need people who understand gardening, not just agriculture. There's a difference. The council agreed. I left the chamber with a nearly impossible task and 3 months to accomplish it. But I was not worried. I had something they did not have. I had grandma's lessons and the memory of soil under my fingernails. Hashtag building the team. I put out the call that same day. Needed. Experienced gardeners, farmers, and plant lovers for the most important agricultural project in galactic history. Must be willing to work with hands, not just computers. Stubborn optimism required. The responses came flooding in. Retired farmers from Earth. Hobbyist gardeners from Mars Colony. A woman from Europa who grew flowers in her apartment. A man from Titan who maintained an heirloom seed bank. People who remembered that plants were living things, not production statistics. Within 2 weeks, I had my team. 53 humans ranging from age 19 to 84. They came from different continents, different planets, different backgrounds. But they all shared one thing. They loved growing things. We met at Station Nexus 12, a massive orbital facility designed to feed 400 million beings. It was failing catastrophically. Walking through the growing sections felt like walking through a graveyard. Plants wilted despite perfect nutrient levels. Fruits rotted before ripening. Roots grew weak and pale. This place has no soul, said Margaretchen, no relation, a 70-year-old woman from Kenya who had farmed her entire life. She touched a dying tomato plant, her weathered hands gentle. It has been optimized to death. Can we save it? Asked Diego Martinez, a young botanist from Luna Station. I looked around at the lifeless efficiency, the sterile perfection, the complete absence of anything messy or wild or alive. Then I looked at my team, these 53 humans who carried millions of years of agricultural wisdom in their calloused hands and patient hearts. Yes, I said, we can save it, but we're going to do it our way. Hashtag the transformation begins. We started by shutting down the automated systems. The station's AI protested, warning that manual control would decrease efficiency by 87%. I ignored it. Efficiency means nothing if everything dies. I told the computer. We are trying something different now. We are trying care. Then we got our hands dirty. Literally. We brought in real soil, shipped at enormous cost from Earth. Not because it was necessary, but because it reminded us what we were doing. Growing things in soil was humanity's oldest technology, older than metal, older than pottery, older than writing. We threw out the optimal spacing patterns and replanted based on intuition and experience. Margaret arranged vegetables the way her grandmother had taught her, companion planting techniques passed down through generations. Tomatoes next to basil, corn with beans and squash, flowers scattered throughout to attract pollinators, even though the station had no natural pollinators. Why plant flowers? Asked Diego. They serve no food production purpose. Because they make the place beautiful, Margaret said simply. Plants grow better when surrounded by beauty. I do not know why. They just do. We adjusted atmospheric conditions not based on computer models, but on how the plants looked. Too much humidity made leaves droop in a particular way. Too little made them curl. You could not learn this from a screen. You had to see it, feel it, know it in your bones. And we talked to the plants. Yes, talk to them. Every human on the team spent time each day walking through the sections, touching leaves, inspecting stems, and speaking encouraging words. The station AI recorded this activity as inefficient verbal communication with non-sentient organisms. But the plants responded, slowly at first, then faster. Leaves greened, stems strengthened, roots dug deeper. Within 3 weeks, production had climbed to 40% capacity. Within 6 weeks, 65%. The Galactic Council sent observers. They watched us work with visible confusion. We did not use advanced technology. We did not apply revolutionary techniques. We just gardened. We cared. We paid attention. We treated every plant like it mattered because it did. This should not work, a Zen3 scientist told me, watching Margaret prune tomato plants by hand. Your methods contradict optimal efficiency models. Maybe your models are wrong. I suggested. Models do not lie. Mathematics does not lie. No, I agreed. But maybe they do not understand everything. Maybe life needs more than math. Hashtag results. The 3-month deadline arrived. Station Nexus. 12 operated at 94% capacity. Plants thrived in their messy, inefficient, hand-tended sections. The decay that killed other stations had stopped completely. I stood before the Galactic Council again, presenting our results. The numbers spoke for themselves. Human agricultural methods, primitive and inefficient, had saved a station that alien science could not fix. How? Krell asked, his scales flickering through a rainbow of confused colors. How did manual labor succeed where our most advanced systems failed? Because, I said, you forgot something important. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be nurtured. You optimized everything, removed all variation, eliminated all inefficiency. But life needs inefficiency. It needs variation. It needs the messy, unpredictable chaos that comes from organic systems managed by beings who care about more than output. You propose we abandon billions of years of technological advancement. Threen asked. No, I said, I propose you remember what you abandoned. Not all old ways are inferior. Sometimes the oldest ways work best because they are built on wisdom, not just knowledge. The vote came quickly. The Council authorized implementation of human agricultural practices across all failing stations. They want us to teach their people how to garden, how to care, how to see plants as living things instead of production units. This will require massive retraining. Vex observed. Reassigning millions of operators. Reducing efficiency in the short term. Yes, I agreed, but in the long term, you will have food. And maybe you will remember something important about yourselves. What is that? Krell asked. I smiled. That even the most advanced civilization can learn from the simple act of getting their hands dirty. Hashtag part 2. Growing together, 1,500 words. Hashtag teaching the galaxy. The retraining program started 3 weeks later. I found myself standing in front of a classroom containing 60 beings from 12 different species. They sat, floated, or rested on specialized platforms designed for their varied anatomies. All of them looked skeptical. "Welcome to Gardening 101, I said, earning confused glances from those whose translators struggle with the concept. "Today, we're going to learn how to grow food the human way." A crystalline student raised a manipulator. "We have all completed advanced agricultural training, multiple degrees, centuries of study. What can you possibly teach us?" "How to fail better," I said. That got their attention. "Everything you learned taught you to avoid failure," I continued. "Optimize conditions, eliminate variables, create perfect systems." But perfect systems are brittle. They cannot adapt. When something goes wrong, they collapse completely. Messy systems that tolerate small failures, survive. I pulled out a tomato plant, roots still covered in soil. "This is not perfect. See these brown spots on the lower leaves? Slight nutrient deficiency. These holes? Insect damage before I brought it inside. This crooked stem? It reached for sunlight through a crowded garden, but it is alive, healthy, and producing fruit. Perfection is not the goal. Resilience is." #, learning patience. The first practical lesson involves soil. Real soil, not hydroponic solutions or nutrient gels. I gave each student a pot, seeds, and a bag of earth dirt. "Plant the seeds," I instructed. "Water them." "Wait. How much water?" asked a Dralaxian student. "What temperature? What light spectrum? What humidity level?" "Enough water," I said. "Not too much, not too little. You will know." "How will we know?" "You will learn by watching. The soil will tell you." This concept frustrated them. They wanted numbers, specifications, exact parameters. I gave them vague instructions and patience requirements. Check your plants daily. Adjust based on what you observe. Trust your instincts. Humans do not have instincts for alien plants, pointed out a void dweller student. How did you develop agricultural intuition for species that evolved on different worlds? By paying attention, I said. Plants communicate, not with words, but with appearance, growth patterns, responses to conditions. You can learn to read them if you try. This seems highly inefficient, the student observed. Probably, I agreed, but it works. Hashtag the first successes. 3 weeks into the program. Students started seeing results. Seeds sprouted. Seedlings grew. Tiny plants pushed toward light. Roots dug into soil, leaves unfurled in patterns that no computer could predict or replicate. A Zen3 student named Rix came to me, scales flickering with excitement yellow. Ambassador Chun, look. They held up a pot containing a small bean plant. It grew. I followed your instructions to check it twice daily, adjust watering based on soil moisture, and speak encouragement. It actually grew. The wonder in Rix's voice made me smile. Of course it grew. That is what plants do when you take care of them. But I made mistakes. I overwatered in the first week. The temperature fluctuated. The light schedule was inconsistent. By optimization standards, this plant should have died. Life is forgiving, I said, more forgiving than machines. You can make mistakes and recover. That is the beauty of organic systems. Similar stories came from other students. The crystalline who accidentally exposed their seedlings to wrong spectrum light, but adjusted in time. The void dweller, who forgot to water for 3 days, but rescued the plants with proper care. The Dralaxian, who planted seeds too deep, but watched them struggle to the surface anyway. They learned that failure was not the end. It was part of the process. And that lesson changed everything. Hashtag spreading the method. Within 2 months, we had trained 500 beings from 30 species. They returned to their stations with seeds, soil, and new understanding. Production numbers started climbing across the galaxy. But something unexpected happened. The students did not just implement human techniques. They adapted them. They added their own variations, insights, approaches based on their unique perspectives. The crystalline developed a method of using their light manipulation abilities, to create perfect growth spectrums while maintaining the hands-on care approach. The void dwellers learned to phase partially out of normal space to observe root systems without disturbing soil. The Dralaxians used their chemical sensitivity to detect plant stress before visual symptoms appeared. They took human wisdom and made it their own. They added to it, improved it, transformed it into something new. This is not what I expected. Krell told me during a progress review. His scales showed contemplative green. I thought we would simply copy your methods. Instead, we are creating hybrid approaches that combine your philosophy with our capabilities. That is exactly what should happen, I said. I never claimed human methods were perfect. I claimed they worked because they were based on care and attention. Those principles apply regardless of who practices them or what tools they use. #, #the resistance. Not everyone accepted the changes happily. A coalition of efficiency experts, led by a Zenthri named Jask, launched a formal protest. Ambassador Chen's methods are destroying centuries of optimization research, Jask declared at a council session. Production increases are temporary. Eventually, efficiency losses will outweigh benefits. We should return to proven scientific approaches. The proven scientific approaches were failing. I pointed out. That is why you asked for my help. A temporary crisis, likely solvable through advanced research. You exploited panic to push primitive methodologies. My primitive methodologies are feeding 4 billion beings who would otherwise starve. The argument continued for hours. Jas presented models, projections, efficiency calculations. I presented results, testimonials, and actual food production numbers. Finally, Krell raised his manipulator for silence. Counselor Jask, do you have plants at your residence? Jask's scales flickered with surprise at the question. Yes, decorative specimens. Why? Do you care for them personally or delegate automated systems? Automated, of course. More efficient. I see. Krell turned to me. Ambassador Chen, do you have plants at your residence? Yes, I said. Tomatoes on my balcony. Herbs in my kitchen window. Flowers by my door. And you care for them personally? Every day. Which of you has living plants, and which has dying plants? Jask's scales flushed to embarrassed gray. This is irrelevant. On the contrary, Krell said, it is entirely relevant. Ambassador Chen's methods work, because she understands something fundamental. Life requires attention, not automated attention, personal attention. We forgot this. We optimize ourselves into extinction. She reminded us how to care. The council voted. Jask's protest was rejected. Human agricultural methods became standard across the galaxy. #, unexpected consequences. The changes went beyond agriculture. As beings across the galaxy learned to garden, to care for living things with their own hands, something shifted. Crime rates dropped on stations that implemented human agricultural programs. Psychological health improved. Social conflicts decreased. The simple act of growing things, of nurturing life, changed people. We have documented a 23% improvement in overall well-being among station populations with active gardening programs, reported Dr. Dean, a collective psychologist, across all species. Participants report feeling more connected, more purposeful, more alive. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. We do not fully understand, but theory suggests that caring for life reminds beings of their own vitality. It provides purpose beyond survival. It creates connection to something larger than themselves. Entire stations redesigned their architecture to include community gardens. Beings from different species work together, sharing techniques, trading seeds, discussing growth challenges. The gardens became gathering places, social centers, points of cultural exchange. A void dweller named Kess started a seed exchange program that spread across 7 sectors. A Dralaxian wrote a best-selling book on companion planting. A group of Zenthri established a botanical garden containing species from 200 worlds. The galaxy was learning to grow things. And in learning to grow things, it was learning to grow together. #, the Grand Garden. 6 months after I first proposed human agricultural methods, The Galactic Council invited me to the inauguration of the Grand Garden, a massive facility at the galactic capital designed to showcase agricultural techniques from every member species. I walked through sections featuring Zenthri floating gardens, crystalline light-grown crops, Thrylaxian chemical cultivation, and dozens of other approaches. But the center contained something special, a traditional earth garden. Tomatoes, beans, corn, squash, sunflowers, and dozens of other species growing in actual soil under warm lights. A small stream ran through it, complete with fish. Butterflies imported from Earth fluttered among flowers. The air smelled of growth, life, and possibility. We wanted to honor the species that saved us, Krell explained, his scales shifting through grateful gold patterns. Without humanity's primitive wisdom, we would have lost everything. It is not primitive, I corrected gently. It is foundational. There is a difference. Indeed. He gestured at the garden. Will you teach me? Personally, I wish to learn the garden with my own manipulators. I smiled. Of course. We will start with tomatoes. They are very forgiving. Hashtag full circle. 1 year after the crisis began, I stood in the council chamber again. This time, I was not alone. Margretchen stood beside me, along with Diego Martinez and 20 other humans who had helped transform galactic agriculture. But we were not the only ones being honored. Rix, the Zenthri student who had grown their first bean plant, stood with us. So did Kess, the void dweller who started the seed exchange, and representatives from 47 species who had embraced the gardening revolution. You saved our civilizations, Krell announced, not with advanced technology or revolutionary science, but with patience, care, and wisdom we have forgotten. Today, we honor not just humanity, but the principle of remembering that progress sometimes means looking backward. The chamber erupted in applause, expressed through sound, color, pheromones, and quantum signals. A symphony of gratitude across species. But the best moment came later, after the ceremony. I found Jask, the efficiency expert who had opposed my methods, tending a small garden outside the council building. Ambassador Chun, he said, scales flickering with sheepish orange. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. What changed your mind? I asked. He gestured at his garden, a chaotic mix of plants from different worlds growing together. I started growing things to prove your methods were inefficient. But something happened. I began to care about the plants, about the process, about connection to life. I still believe in efficiency, but I learned that some things matter more. Like what? Like knowing where your food comes from, like working with your own hands, like watching something grow because you helped it grow, like remembering that efficiency serves life, not the other way around. I knelt beside his garden, examining a beautiful purple vegetable I did not recognize. What is this? A Zenthax bloom, native to my home world. My grandmother grew these. I never understood why until now. She was not just growing food. She was growing memory, tradition, connection to place and time and identity. Now you understand, I said. Now I understand. He touched a leaf gently, the way my grandmother had taught me. Thank you for teaching us to remember. Hashtag the future. I returned to Earth for a visit, to the farm where I grew up, where my grandmother taught me to grow tomatoes. The old garden was still there, lovingly maintained by my cousins. I knelt in the soil, feeling the dirt under my fingernails again, and planted seeds from across the galaxy. Zenthri vegetables next to Earth tomatoes. Crystalline grain, beside Thrylaxian herbs. A living testament to what I had learned. The galaxy was not saved by advanced technology or superior intelligence. It was saved by wisdom, the ancient human understanding that life requires care, attention, and love. That growing things is not just about production, but about connection. That the oldest ways sometimes work best because they remember what matters. My grandmother used to say that if you want to change the world, start with a garden. She was right. I started with one garden. Now the entire galaxy was gardening together. And in learning to garden, in getting their hands dirty, in caring for life with patience and attention. Millions of beings across thousands of worlds were discovering something humanity had known for millennia, that in nurturing life, we nurture ourselves, that in growing things, we grow, that in caring for the smallest seed, we find the meaning of civilization itself. The galaxy would never forget again. The lesson was planted too deep, rooted too firmly. We were all gardeners now, and the garden was infinite,